Hello, everyone. My name is Cornell Cruz Jr. I am the Executive Director for the Community Reinvestment Alliance of Florida, and welcome to the Just Economy podcast. We have a great guest today. We're going to talk about something that's near and dear to all of our hearts. We're going to talk about transit and cars and other ways and innovative solutions for transit. But we welcome you again to the Just Economy podcast. We are going into our 6th year now, and our statewide organization, membership organization, encouraging the banks to invest in communities per the Community Reinvestment Act of 1977. I encourage those folks, the banks, to work with the social impact organizations and the community in order to create a better community. And we look forward to doing something in your particular area, your particular city very, very soon. So today, we have something that we all suffer with in one way, shape, form, or fashion. We have someone from the Miami Transit Alliance, a nonprofit social impact organization. I really do not like to use the word nonprofit. I love social impact because that's what the nonprofits do. They impact society. So from the social impact organization called the Miami Transit Alliance, we got Nicholas Duran here of Duran fame. No, I'm kidding. He's a little young for Duran.
Hey, I'm about it.
Yeah, I don't think you were even born when Duran was out. But
you could have like Rio as the intro for this podcast. I think that'd be a great
cool,
way
right?
to start the segment.
That would be cool. That's a great thing. Great idea, Nick. Great idea. So I'm going to ask Nicholas to introduce himself and talk about himself as well as the Miami Transit Alliance. And so we welcome Nicholas Duran.
Thank you for having me, Cornell. It's great to be here. My name's, again, Nicholas Duran. I am the Advocacy Manager for Transit Alliance Miami. I've been with the organization 13 months yesterday.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a phenomenal experience getting to learn a lot more about public transportation and how it affects all these different aspects of our quality of life. My background, just so you know, it was not public transportation. I did not focus on urban planning issues. I was always very curious about how cities affect our everyday living and how we interact with each other.
Sure.
But my background academically was political science initially. Yeah, and that was tough for me.
I'm sure.
Yeah, so I had to election systems and looking at that kind of like just type of data was not my thing. I wasn't going to be a political scientist, so the way I kind of reconciled that was going into or specializing also in environmental studies and environmental sciences. So that's how I came to that.
Oh, okay. Well, I can see where politics can lead to transit, especially here in our area, as we work on our transit issues that are major. And if you haven't noticed, just hop on 95 any time of day or night, and you definitely know what I'm speaking of. We are known for our traffic issues and problems and never starting on time for anything. And most of the time it's due to traffic.
Yeah.
But Nicholas, I'm glad you're here today because I wanted to talk to you about some items that are going on as far as transit is concerned. As I just stated in a joking manner, but those issues are real. Yeah. How we get around here in South Florida. And we're limited by a couple of things. We have the ocean on the east side, and we have the Everglades on the west side. So we're as you look at us, we're a narrow area, considering we have natural barriers that are, and one that I believe shouldn't be a natural barrier. They're not being used, and we're definitely going to talk about that. But overall, give us a little assessment of of the transit in Miami-Dade County.
I guess I'll say what's on everyone's minds is that it could be better.
Sure.
At least we have it. I will say that it's a very, very important resource for a lot of folks, especially those who don't have cars. I would say it's arguably the most important resources these folks have, especially in terms of getting to their workplace. And really in terms of Miami-Dade, what's unique about us is that it's really our bus service. People are surprised that we have a metro rail, at least people who aren't from here, that we have a metro rail system. But really the linchpin for our transportation service in terms of public transit is our bus service. And carries a lot of people from West Miami-Dade to the economic centers in downtown, in South Beach. And of course, these are the people that, make the city operate.
Sure. So, I guess my pet peeve with that is the buses contribute to traffic, contribute to greenhouse gases, emissions. They contribute to all of that. And granted, there has been some things done where we've gotten some buses that run on gas or electric things of that nature. We are slowly trending that way. And it's interesting that you talk about the folks who have our major industry is tourism. We don't build anything. We don't manufacture anything. Our thing is tourism. So, and most of that industry is located east, right? And we have the low to moderate income, for the most part, lived west, right? So getting them from there to there, and I read an article a few years ago in the Miami Herald about a woman who was a maid at one of the hotels on the beach, lived in Liberty City, which when I get in my car takes me maybe 20 minutes on a good day, if there's no accident or anything, or it's not peak traffic times. It took her 3 hours by bus to get to work every day. Yeah. So we got to look at alternatives to doing this, and I know Miami Transit Alliance has been leading us in this fight for getting better transportation. So when you talk about getting better bus services, what are some of the things that you guys are looking at and recommending to county government?
Well, for starters, a lot of how we got started as an organization was really spearheading the Better Bus Network. Mm-hmm. So for folks at home or listening who aren't aware, the Better Bus Network was at the time the largest grassroots-led redesign of any countywide bus network in the entire country. It's been replicated in other parts since then. And yeah, the project was ultimately approved in 2021. We've just run into the hurdle of not having enough bus operators to operate the system.
Yeah, I see the ads on all the buses all the time about they need more bus operators.
Yes. Yeah. So if you're looking for work, please do apply. You know, great pension, and the benefits are good. But yeah, the problem is labor related, as we've seen in sectors all across the country, and something that we're still recovering from. And it precedes the pandemic, but of course COVID-19 just further exacerbated that reality.
Sure.
So we're still trying to get to pre-pandemic levels of service. We're somewhat there, but improvements still need to happen. So we're crossing our fingers and looking for a way forward on the Better Bus Network. And of course, what through our efforts and our engagements with the community, you know, we conducted thousands of surveys, workshops, events, and the consensus was that people wanted to see, overwhelmingly, I mean, just the majority of people wanted to see higher frequency of bus service, so that you're not missing the bus and then waiting 45 minutes, an hour for the next one. So getting those headways down to something that's a lot more manageable, you know, 15, 20, 30-minute headways as compared to 45 minutes an hour, that was a major priority for the redesign.
So, and when you talk about the redesign, one of the things I was reading on the Miami Transit Alliance is that you're definitely leading the initiative on dedicated bus lanes.
Yes.
But in particular, for those of you who don't know, who don't live in Miami-Dade County or don't or only visit here, Flagler Street is the center of Miami-Dade County. It like splits the county in half, right? So, but on Flagler Street, there's no dedicated bus lanes at this particular time. So, how would that help increase frequency and the time it takes to get from one part of from the airport, for instance, to South Beach?
Well, the simple answer is yes, 100%. So dedicated bus lanes, I mean, they're not always the most popular option because at the end of the day, we're dealing with drivers who see us or the prospect of them losing a lane of car traffic as a threat. Yeah. But the point is I mean, public transportation is not going to work if if the bus is waiting in traffic with all the other vehicles. There's no benefit to that. And so you have to provide some service that is more effective. And the goal, ideally, would be that as you provide a better service, less people will end up using their cars because they have the option, because they have something that is more viable. And, you know, everyone drives their own car in Miami, which is part of the problem. It's part of the reason why we have so much traffic congestion. Whereas you can fit 70, 75 people on a bus, potentially, and it takes up a very small fraction of the space.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned earlier, I mean, Miami is in a very unique geographic position where we have the Everglades to the west, we have Biscayne Bay to the southeast. So we've kind of reached the limits of how much we can grow.
Sure.
And a lot of the problem that we've been dealing with is sprawl. It's fueling a lot of the problems that we have with transportation, with traffic, and also with housing affordability and our ability to construct it. But that's something that we have to be wary and very mindful of, that we need to be using our space a lot more efficiently. And one of the ways that we can do that is transportation, public transit, whether that's inclusive of biking, walking. It's also inclusive of buses and other modes of travel. But the biggest thing is we have to give people the option, a reliable option, that's not their car.
Yeah. And here's why. Let's move to another subject that's near and dear to my heart, right? And that is our waterways. How we are, and you and I briefly touched on this before. Why are we not using our waterways more effectively? For instance, why? And this is the example I love to use. If I live in Palm Beach County and I want to go to a Heat game, why is it I can't hop on a ferry with several stops along the way, get off right in, because the Heat, for those of you who don't know, the Heat Arena is right on the water, and get off, go to the Heat game. After the Heat game, get back on that boat with a leisurely, beautiful ride, because it's beautiful. Our seacoast, our coast is beautiful, and take that ride back up and get in the car and do it that way. And also, with all the available clean energy that we could use as far as boat traffic is concerned, and back to something else I know Miami Transit Alliance has been working on, and that's a ferry system over to South Beach as well. So my question would be, is it just the powers that be just don't want to do it, or is there other things that I'm missing?
I think it's a tricky question. I would say part of it,
it was meant to be loaded.
Part of it is, I would say it is the powers that be, because it's not to say that those conversations have not happened. I can't go into very heavy specifics because I'd be stepping on someone's toes.
Gotcha.
But we have tried and we've pushed for clean, renewable, all electric ferry service on the bay. Not necessarily. Whether the scope would have included, Palm Beach
and Broward,
we don't know. But at the very least, we could have some sort of dedicated service across the bay between the downtown area and to South Beach. I think that would be a fantastic option, and especially as we start to think long term, where we do have the Bay Link that's currently being considered. And hopefully that moves forward and we can finally see it, because it's the core. As far as the county has a SMART program made up of 6 different transit corridors that we've planned. These are our long-term, mass transit goals. And everyone oftentimes wants Metro Rail, but the corridor that makes the most sense from a cost-benefit perspective, and in terms of ridership and having the ridership to support it long-term, is having a rail service across the bay to South Beach,
and that's more cost effective than doing it with a ferry system.
So compared to, I can't say in terms of relative to a ferry system. I'm not saying that it should be one or the other. I think why not both?
Okay, I never thought about it that way. So thank you. I never even thought about it that way. I was so enamored with the ferry system that I never thought, why couldn't we have both? You're exactly right. Yeah. That'd be a beautiful ride too.
Exactly. I mean, the goal is to have options. And I mean, you look at large metropolitan cities like New York, where I lived in New York City for a couple of years, and that's how I really started to fall in love with public transportation and being able to walk where you needed to be, wherever you needed to get to, whether it's your healthcare appointments, whether it's the grocery store. And they operate a ferry service just like that between Jersey City and Manhattan. But you also have the PATH train, which will get you to Jersey City. So it's about having options and alternatives. No one's going to take away your car, but at least you have. If you're feeling, you wake up one day and you want to drive, then that's your prerogative. But if you wake up one day and you'd prefer to sit on the bus and read a book or take care of something that you need to for work, you can do that. As long as we're providing a service that is reliable, that feels dignified. That's really the goal. That's the vision and what we're shooting for in a place like Miami.
And I understand we have to be cost effective. I get it. I get it. You know, our cost of living in Miami-Dade County in particular is extremely high. Inflation in the rest of the country is running about 4% and dropping. We're at 9% and gaining in Miami-Dade County.
Yeah.
The cost of living, it costs more now to live in Miami-Dade County than it does Chicago, Los Angeles, New York. It just costs more to live here, and a lot has to do with a lot of those, that number. One of the reasons why we're so expensive is transportation, and that's why Nicholas and his organization is so important as far as advocating for the people. That's why you guys are so important, because without the transportation, with the transportation not being up to par, that makes it even more expensive and harder to deal with. So I'm glad you brought up about having those options, going both ways, because I had never even thought about it. I was so locked in on the ferry thing, but I definitely agree with you with as far as the Bay Link and having a ferry option. So let's talk about 395.
Yes.
And how
I drove on it today, so I'm very happy to talk about the 395.
So as for those of you who don't know, they're improving the 395 down here in South Florida in Miami-Dade County. I noticed that you guys have some initiatives going that you would like to see done with that, and could you go over a couple of them for us?
Okay, so the 395 project is a signature bridge project. That's a little bit separate. We've had a more recent campaign. For starters, both are under the purview of Florida Department of Transportation,
Sure.
District 6. And Signature Bridge project is down the pipeline. They're working on it. We've all seen or had to deal with lane closures and additional delays along the 836 because of the fact that they're double decking that segment of the highway. So that project is coming, whether we like it or not, at this point. And underneath it, in downtown, that's where they're planning the underdeck. So I will say, in terms of the underdeck, there's a great opportunity for community engagement, especially for residents of Overtown. I would encourage people, they do have monthly community meetings, to go out and participate in that. You can check their website for Underdeck Miami. I'm not sure, that's not the official name, but they're figuring out what it's going to be. So similar to, basically kind of like an extension of the High Line, but underneath the highway.
Gotcha.
So it's a linear park. But what we've been focusing on more recently is a proposal to double deck a segment of the Julia Tuttle Causeway, the I-195. And that's given us a little bit more concern. This is very early on, so it's in the project development and evaluation phase. And really, it's the part where they're supposed to be doing all their due diligence and collecting the data, gathering the input, and evaluating the different alternatives.
Okay, so it's interesting. Let's talk about that, because it's interesting that you talk about double decking the Julia Tuttle. So when you say double decking, stacked one on top of the other, would these be all car lanes, or would this be pedestrian? Because when you bring it up, you remind me of New York City, because some of the Brooklyn Bridge has pedestrian on top and cars on the bottom, right? Yeah. So is that what you guys are advocating for, or is there something else that I'm missing here?
So both would be both levels would be for car traffic largely. Now, what we're advocating for is more bus improvements, more bike and pedestrian improvements. There are some aspects of the alternative that they said that they're still considering, but it's been sort of promoted as and kind of shown to us in a way like this is kind of like the desired alternative. Like this is kind of what they're going with, even though they've said to us publicly that it's not the final project that's going to be happening. But it'd be two levels of car traffic, and then a separated shared use path for bikes with its own independent right of way, which sounds great. The problem is that because it has its own separate right of way, it requires new construction over Biscayne Bay, which is a problem. Biscayne Bay is an outstanding Florida water. It has unique legal protections for that reason, and anyone who's lived in Miami long enough knows that the bay is on the brink of collapse. So we've got lots of different animal species, but also most importantly, we have the seagrass beds at the bottom of the bay, which are important in terms of habitat, but also environmental services in protecting us from, for example, storm surges.
Sure.
But that could potentially be a non-starter for that shared use path because it has to go through environmental review through the National Environmental Policy Act, so NEPA, and it's very possible. And also it requires evaluation through that process by the state's Department of Environment.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be a potential hurdle for that. And we want to make sure that if for whatever reason there's some sort of environmental conflict because of the design criteria, that there's a suitable alternative that's going to be in place. That's not on the chopping block because of environmental concerns. And it's telling because of the fact that here we are, we're proposing building a double-decker highway over between Wynwood Design District and Miami Beach, and we're concerned about the environmental impacts of a bike lane. Which I get it because it has to do with the resources themselves, but it's clear that the priorities are different. If we wanted to include some sort of like bike path within the already established right of way, we could make space for that.
It's interesting that some people maybe look at this and go, well, how does this affect me? And I think one of the great things about the Transit Alliance, as Nicholas stated earlier, they have events, they have meetings, they conduct meetings, they're at anything that has to do with transportation, bike paths, even green space, they participate in, and this stuff directly affects the community. For instance, if we, let's move west a we stayed east of 95 for quite a bit. Let's talk about the west, out west. And especially west of the airport, for instance. Yeah. And as we talk about west of the airport, or the surrounding areas around the airport and moving westward, the traffic out there can be terrible as well. Even though it's not, east, on 95 or 395 or 195, but it can still be terrible out there as well. So what are there some special projects you guys are looking at out in the western part of the county?
So for starters, and I think this is going to piggyback on your earlier question about dedicated bus lanes, one thing that we're very excited about is a recent item was introduced in the Transportation Planning Organization. They're another one of our transit planning authorities made up of different members from different municipalities and commissioners from the Board of County Commissioners. And the item is going to look at the possibility of dedicated bus lanes along the Flagler corridor, which would be fantastic. I think that's something that we need to have long term. I mean, we've all seen the bus on shoulder that's on the 836. Sometimes you're stuck in traffic during rush hour trying to get to work in the morning, and that bus will pass you.
Yeah. Makes you think too. When you see that bus coming by, you makes you go, wait a minute, I could already be at my job, or even better, going home, seeing that bus fly by will make you think, I could already be at home, or at least, at a car park where I park my car in order to ride the bus. But go ahead.
The magic of dedicated lanes. I mean, if you had that dedicated service on and off the highway, then I mean it'd be so much more effective. And so looking at the future viability of that, and I think there's a lot of potential there for sure. And there's also the Kendall corridor, which not a lot of people were really know is even happening. I mean, it's going to be a fight. Kendall has the way that it's zoned. A lot of it is very sprawled out, single family zoning, and there's not too many lanes of car traffic. A lot of them, also thinking about it's largely middle class Hispanic community, and culturally, I mean, there's this sort of people are nervous about public transportation because for them it is kind of antithetical to this idea of the American dream, where it's like people want the nuclear family, which is a house. It's mom, dad, a dog, 1.5 kids, and their car.
You just brought up something very, very important that I hadn't thought about. This is why I love talking to people, because it made me think about things that I hadn't thought about. Because I claim to be one of the nosiest persons in the world. My goal in life is to know everything. So, but you brought up something very, very important, and that is culturally. How is it? That's got to be a mission here in Dade County, because we have so many different cultures. So for the Miami Transit Alliance, in order to get an initiative or even talk about an initiative or get the community involved? How are you guys bridging that gap between the culture, the different cultures that all these transportation items that you speak of have to pass through in some way, shape, form, or fashion?
Yeah. Well, I will say that what really helps is that we all have to deal with the traffic.
Yeah. We have one common, we have all have that one common issue.
So we
right?
have a very common enemy, which is traffic. And so it helps to have a common enemy. And we have to really hit home that, like, you know, at the end of the day, we are the traffic. Us sitting in a car by ourselves, when we could be carpooling. We could at the very least have like another 4 people in the car who, you know, that saves another 4 vehicles on the highway or on the street. You know, so that's one aspect. Another thing is, like, I think is what's really great about the work that we do and what makes it so fun is that we get to be creative and that we get to make these events interesting and engaging for people. You know, yes, people want to do something, like people want to be a part of something and they want to, you know, exact change and be part of something that makes a difference. But more than anything, people want to be entertained.
Sure.
And that's really the reality of what we live with. So, I mean, we try to bake that into our advocacy in different ways.
That's an incredible, and believe me, that's got to be a feat that, you know, I think 2 things in South Florida, I think in Miami-Dade County in particular, that hits us all. Affordable housing and transportation. Those 2 things hit us all. So I'm amazed that you guys are able to bridge those gaps over the different cultural differences, as well as the different communities, because this community wants this community wants that, or it sees a different need. But transportation and the issues that transportation or lack thereof bring affects us all.
Yeah.
Whether you live in a mansion or you live in a affordable housing project, it affects us all. Because even those folks that live in the mansions have to get around some kind of way, whether they have their Bentley in traffic or they're in an Uber or Lyft, right? So we're all affected by it. It's very interesting that you guys are able to cross those bridges, and I'm sure it's a tough job trying to coalesce those folks together, even though traffic is one of our we all have that issue. Yeah. So when you talk about the dedicated bus lanes, do we have examples of in other cities where it definitely works and we should incorporate it more here in South Florida?
Well, I mean, we could definitely point to the Dutch model. So over in the Netherlands, I mean, a lot of it is, you know, dedicated lanes for transit services, for bikes. And then a big aspect of it is also signalization that prioritizes these types of modes for the same, like, mainly the main priority is to keep people safe. Yeah. And I don't think people realize that how dangerous driving is, and we do it every single day.
Like it's nothing.
Like it's nothing. It's like the 3rd, 4th cause of death, and we're just kind of here flirting with death on a regular basis. You know? And that's fine. We need to be able to get around. And, you know, we're not going to stop anybody from driving. But the priority in terms of the way that we design our streets, the way that we design our roads, our communities, should not be level of service for vehicles. It should be people. At the end of the day. And their safety. Doesn't matter what mode they're in, whether it's drivers, whether it's bicyclists, whether it's pedestrians, all of the above. Take care of all of them, because at the end of the day, I mean, this very car-centric infrastructure, yes, it's dangerous for pedestrians, it's dangerous for cyclists, but it's also very dangerous for drivers. And I mean, we see the number of traffic fatalities that we have in Florida in general, but Miami-Dade too. Yeah. Both outliers. We have very high rates of traffic fatalities.
So bringing that up, I'm glad you just brought something that maybe triggered another question for you, is pedestrians and pedestrian education. I saw where the mayor wanted to do some things about how we make our highways, or how we make our surface streets as well, how that's conducted, how that traffic flows. But you know what I noticed also is that I remember when I first moved back to Miami. I retired from the military back in 2000, and I came back home in late 2000. And it seemed like every Friday on the radio there was a pedestrian getting hit. Every Friday it seemed like, right? And I was like, why is it so prevalent here? And I also think in driving and walking in Miami, is pedestrians we have to educate our pedestrians on how to properly walk in our streets as well.
Yeah, that's our solution.
Yeah.
No crosswalks or anything either. We'll just like kind of
just walk anywhere.
It's pedestrian education, but nothing in terms of drivers, nothing in terms of infrastructure. And that's the big one, infrastructure. You know, you can educate all you like, but you know, unless you have, we're humans, we make mistakes.
Sure.
And we design these roads with these assumptions that we're going to follow all of the rules, that we're going to know what all of the rules are. We know when to stop. And that's just not the way that we act on a regular basis. That's not how we live our lives. And especially when you have infrastructure that focuses solely on cars, we get conditioned to not think about pedestrians, not think about bicyclists.
Sure.
And it becomes an afterthought. We don't look both ways when we're turning. We don't expect a bicyclist to be coming in our blind spot when we're making a rolling right turn. You know, these have very serious consequences. People die.
Yeah.
And until we start getting serious about that and really realizing that something has to change and that we've been doing the same thing for so long and expecting different results, that just doesn't fly anymore. That's not where we are. Not in 2023.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is we got to have education and advocacy all the way around. Because as a motorcyclist, I'm very careful. I always ride. I tell people I ride like everybody's trying to hit me. So you know, you have to ride defensively, but I also think you have to walk defensively as well. Because you just made a very interesting point about these people with the rolling right-hand turns, and boom, you know, the next thing you know, you've hit a pedestrian. So all of this education, and it affects every single one of us. Because sooner or later, you're going to walk. You're going to have to park, and you're going to have to walk. So let's move down south a little bit and talk about the bus throughway that's in Southern Dade along US 1. I've always thought it was a good idea. I wish it was a train, personally.
A lot of folks do. Yeah.
But I've always thought it was a good idea to have that throughway down US 1, and I was interested on the Transit Alliance's thoughts on that.
Well, for starters, we love the South Dade Transitway. It's great because it has its own dedicated service, its own right-of-way path, and it's going to be a lot faster, a lot more frequent, and it's going to be rail-like. And what that means is going to have elevated platforms. You pay.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's going to have elevated platforms.
Okay, I knew I read, but I hadn't read that. That's great.
You pay to get in already, so you've already prepaid. It reduces the delays that you have to deal with regularly on the bus, which is like, you know, folks like sliding in their dollars through like
or their card, even though that's quick.
Actually having to tap in, you know, one by one, people can just walk onto the bus, find their seat, and it'll keep moving. And then there is actually a trigger clause in terms of ridership that once, I believe, I don't know specifically what the number is. I think it's been around 30,000, 35,000 riders daily along that corridor. It's supposed to then require the county to convert it to rail. This is not something that we're gonna see for a very long time.
Yeah, it's going to take a while.
Yeah, we need the density along the corridor in terms of housing to support that type of ridership. But it's not outside of the realm of possibility. We could very well have that in 20, 30 years, and especially considering that South Dade has the fastest growing population.
Most definitely.
Yes, which is creating its own problems,
sure,
of course. But there is opportunity provided we're smart about how we develop this area.
So are you guys advocating and helping with and having a conversation in the development of housing along that transit corridor? Because you just cited some very big numbers here that if we did housing along the travel corridor, it would also help as far as triggering another thing, i.e. trains, right?
Yeah. I think there's a very, very important dialogue there, that's for sure. We can't be everywhere all at once. So
yes,
I will say that.
Yes, you can.
We can. There are ways, and we're working on it. Which is our way of doing it is so you know we do have a lot of folks that are very passionate about this type of work, that they get it, they're interested in it, and we want to create opportunities for them to get involved and do what we call in this space, you know, base building and resource building for a lot of folks. And having something like that where we can bring together volunteers, you can bring people who might not necessarily be familiar with the space but are interested in this connection and really how transportation affects them. We can empower those folks to have the tools to advocate for these types of solutions in their communities, to get more people involved. And I think that's the more sustainable solution. That's really the goal of what we're trying to do as an organization, I think, is to really get people understanding how important transportation is as a problem in our everyday life. But then also giving you the resources, giving you the know-how to go in and voice your concerns or voice your vision for what you would want to see in your community, in terms of how you get around, in terms of how you live, work, and play.
I think that's such a viable answer, and I think I would hope from as we move forward in our transportation issues that and quality of life that Miami Transit Alliance is involved more in the conversation. It's not that they don't want to be; it's the powers that be have to include them.
Yeah.
I think you have to be included because you are an advocate for the community and what the community needs. From like you said, from bike trails to walkable areas to walk trails to all those things that are happening. That as we develop here in Miami-Dade County, it seems like every 5 minutes there's a building going up. There's very few blades of grass that don't have a building on them. I don't care how small. It could be as big as this table here, but a developer will find a way to put a building on it. And it's a cottage industry here in Miami-Dade County in particular. Yeah. So let's move up north a little bit. So and out west. So the transit train that was originally back in the day when Ronald Reagan first gave the money for it was supposed to go all the way to the County Line Road. It stopped at 81st Street or 82nd Street. I've seen that there's a proposal now to complete that, to move it all the way up into Miami Gardens and move it at the stadium. Yeah. Do you see also a pathway along that railway as well for housing, that housing can integrate with the transportation system?
Yes, actually. So that's I'm really excited that you brought that up. That's something that I've been very interested in recently. Part of my work is I also help lead our Build It Bike It campaign, and we organize these bike tours every couple of months, known as Dade Rides. Our next ride is looking at the Miami Gardens, specifically. Every ride has a theme. Also, we do experience different types of bike infrastructure, no infrastructure versus bike areas with lanes, and we try to collect some data and some input from folks who get to ride that, which is always fun. But also we try to explore other aspects like within the community, whether it's the history and future transportation opportunities and solutions. And we wanted to highlight housing along the North Corridor. I'm doing also a part of the Community Scholars in Affordable Housing Fellowship with UM's Office of Community and Civic Engagement. And that's been a very eye-opening experience, something that I've, through this project that we're doing for our capstone, become very interested in housing along the Northern Corridor. There we have what's called the Rapid Transit Zone. Last year, those zones were expanded. So the RTZ expansion, as it's been called, created a lot of different opportunities for affordable housing within these areas. And there is county-owned land along the North Corridor that could be redeveloped. That I've been looking at and have been curious about for affordable housing. And if we wanted to do that, for starters, I mean, if the stars align and we can get the financing in place, there are opportunities there. And I think that's a big and very important discussion to have, especially now that we have this new tool for more transit-oriented development, and we want to make sure that that we're ensuring affordability long term, and that we're doing it in a way that that is fair, that's equitable, and creates these lasting solutions in an area that is dealing with gentrification, it's dealing with climate gentrification uniquely as well, and an overall cost of living problem, which is just getting too high.
Yeah. And so I'm glad you brought up climate gentrification. For those of you who don't know what climate gentrification is when instead of the actual climate moving folks out of low to moderate income areas, the climate has affected an area. Developers see that the high point areas here in South Florida are in the low to moderate income areas, and they're buying up and moving those folks out of those areas and putting it for development. So they've gentrified a particular area simply for the sake of putting up another building, a more expensive building, and attracting more folks who are more higher end, for lack of a better word, to that particular community. If you want to know what it looks like and you want to see it in person, ride in Little Haiti and you'll see it in person, exactly what climate gentrification is. So I'm really interested in that project. I'm glad that project's finally, after all these years, because Reagan put that money out for that project in the 80s, and here we are in 2023, and then now we're finally looking at it's actually going to come to fruition, and we're going to finish it. The train from all the way from the 81st Street all the way to the county line where it was supposed to be in the first place. So I'm really glad that you guys are into looking at ways to add affordable housing as well as mixed use housing into that along that corridor all the way up 27th Avenue. I think that's a very viable project, and I look forward to seeing more of that. The Miami Transit Alliance is doing some great work that behind the scenes that we don't even know about. I think that all these initiatives that they're trying to do, trying to make it more pedestrian friendly, trying to make it more walkable, trying to use alternatives for us to get out of our cars. I would love to get out of my car. It's to this point now that, and with parking costing so much, it's to the point now that if I have to go to Brickell, I'll Uber to Brickell, because by the time I get down there and I have to go to a meeting, I got to park, and then parking is going to run me $30, $40 to park in one of the garages easily. It's just the expense, and plus the driving, and then the hassle of getting your way around down there. And Brickell is pretty walkable, when you look at it. Drastic change from when I was growing up. When you went down Brickell Avenue, you could actually see the water from Brickell Avenue. Now you can't. You have all the high rises there. So it's as we look at our urban centers, and here's what I mean by urban centers: Edgewater area, downtown area, Brickell. As we look at those areas, and we do have the train, we have the people mover, especially in the downtown area. Are you guys is the Transit Alliance looking at other ways in order to make it more friendly? Because here's what I think about: it is walkable. I get it, but it's not New York City walkable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So how are you guys engaging with those urban crowded areas that have become crowded, especially over the last 10 years?
Yeah. I mean, that's an excellent question. It gets into a lot of different things in terms of infrastructure. Also, the infrastructure that needs to be there because it affects driver psychology. So I want to say that some of the issues with Brickell is, like, for example, down Brickell Ave. I mean, it's like 6 lanes, 7 lanes of car traffic. So you have such a large right of way that's dedicated just to cars, and that makes people speed. The wider the road is, the faster you drive. That's just the way it is. So
the psychology is there.
It is, exactly. I mean,
I got more room. That means the faster I can go.
100%. And thankfully you've got tall buildings. So taller buildings also help slow you down a little bit. Although we're built different here in Miami. So
nothing slows us down.
Yeah, nothing slows us down. Everyone's out there on Brickell in their sports car, and they want to let it roar. But still, one of the best things that we can be doing in these types of urban spaces is, for starters, and it's shocking to me, actually. We just did a walking tour of Brickell, in which we wanted to highlight the importance of crosswalks. We dressed up, some of our members of our team dressed up as zebras because of the stripes. And they're easy to see, for drivers. But that crosswalks are important, and we have to have them. And what was jarring to me is the very apparent lack of crosswalks in a place like Brickell, and signalization too. So actually having signs that flash and let you know, like, hey, a pedestrian's crossing, to get people's attention. A lot of that wasn't there. And so it's surprising. And also bike lanes too. You have an area that what you would expect to be surprisingly bikeable,
but not so.
And not so. And there, it's not that there aren't people there doing it. There are people everywhere jogging, riding e-scooters, riding their bikes. They just, unfortunately, they don't have the infrastructure to support it. And some of these roads still have 35-mile-per-hour speed limits. If you get hit going 35, 40 miles an hour on a bike, I mean...
Yeah, it's not going to be fun.
It's not good. Different story at 20 miles an hour, but 35... So we have to have these sort of slow streets improvements that get drivers to be a little bit more mindful about how fast they're driving, and we do that by narrowing some of the roads, adding more crosswalks, elevating at certain intersections, for example, or even speed bumps. These are just a couple different examples of treatments that we could implement in an area like Brickell, just to get people to slow their roll a little bit.
Yeah, because I know this. They put several crosswalks in, especially along Biscayne Boulevard in Edgewater, for instance. They put those in the middle between the lights, because Biscayne Boulevard used to be like that too. Like, because you had a light at 36th Street, and the next light wasn't until like maybe 25th or 26th Street, and people would fly in between them. And now they have those crosswalks there, and that's what I mean by New York walkable. When you go to New York City and you walk in New York City, 95% of the people use the crosswalks. That's one of the things I really noticed about them. And there's plenty of time to get from one side of the street to the other side of the street. So, there's even some of the crosswalks, especially across, 8 to 10 lanes or more, they give you almost a minute to actually cross the street. And that's why I mean by New York City walkable, in case folks were trying to, what does he mean by New York City walkable? Granted, it's walkable, but not New York City walkable, because it's different. And we as pedestrians, sometimes you have to admit that we don't obey the rules. We walk outside of the crosswalk, walk everywhere but in the crosswalk. Even there's I was sitting in my car the other day, and a guy the crosswalk was if you'd have crossed at the crosswalk, which was another 20 feet, but he was coming in between the cars. Yeah. And all it takes is one person looking down at their phone, not paying attention, boom, he's hit. Right? And that's the first thing that came to my mind. If you'd have been using the crosswalk, which is another 20 feet, just think your options of going down, your options of getting hit go down tremendously, I think. So I think it's a lot of, it's not just driver education, but pedestrian education as well.
It's a social contract, and we have to
change the mindset, right?
Yeah, we do. But I will say that that still, though, like the way that that contract is constructed right now, it's slanted in favor of drivers.
Yeah. Yeah. There's been some changes as far as bike lanes, and making it a law you got to give them at least 3 feet and all that good stuff. Not everybody adheres to it, but at least there's been a little change in that. But I see what you're saying.
And the reason why I say that is because I think there is room in some places for pedestrians to start to reclaim those spaces.
Really?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, look at Geralda in Coral Gables. I mean, now it's booming. You have all these businesses and restaurants that have brought out seating for people, and it's seeing more development. It's seeing more activity than it ever has. And before, I mean, it used to be car traffic.
Yeah.
And then, of course, like on-street parking. And the fear at the time, especially largely from business owners in that area, where they're just like, oh, you're going to kill us. And of course, there was that temporary disruption from having the construction.
Sure.
But now, once they got through that, I mean, they're doing better than they ever have before.
Yeah. It is definitely a different vibe when you go over there, even if you're a pedestrian or you're driving. It is different when you go take, especially on Miracle Mile. It's different.
And it does such a service for community and how we engage with one another and how we relate with one another by having those spaces. And I think we see social trust in America is on the decline.
Sure.
And I think there's an argument to be made that it could be arguably lower in a place like Miami, because you have folks from all these different cultures, and also we're also geographically separated. We all live in our own little neighborhood units.
Yeah. True.
And we don't connect in a meaningful way. We don't have the opportunity to, because we're driving everywhere. We spend a lot of our time angry at other people because we're driving everywhere too. So it's just like,
how many times you look over at another car and you say, in your guy, please take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath. We're all stuck.
Yeah. Like there's nowhere to go. We're all in this together. But but we have to have spaces that send that message too. We're all in this together. Like we are all human, and we all live in Miami. We love this place, and this is a space for us to just exist and be instead of just having to drive. And I think that's important and something that we should be mindful of. I would like to see more pedestrian-only spaces in a place like Miami. And I have my vision for certain places. Like, Doral, City Center, I would love to see that just be like, pedestrians only.
So I'm glad you bring this up, because this is my next question and my next deal. I remember when I was growing up, Lincoln Road was a two-way street. It was not pedestrian only like it is now. It was a two-way street. I've read and heard that they want to do Flagler Street the same way in downtown Miami, is make it pedestrian only. What do you guys? What is the Transit Alliance stance, or what do you guys think about making some areas pedestrian only, especially that were at one time there were high traffic areas, but now when you look at it, like I look at Flagler Street downtown, I'm like, okay, I can agree with that being pedestrian only.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if it makes sense, then of course we want it. I mean, don't just make any spot.
No,
just, like,
of course.
Just point at a map and say, but of course, like, if this is a spot where, like, there is opportunity. And also, I think when we look at the data, too, and just, like, is this a problematic road? Like, is for this, like, X, Y, and Z reasons, like, it's not maybe an area that people should be driving in. That's another reason. But yeah, we, us as an organization, we would support any sort of infrastructure development, generally speaking, that prioritizes pedestrians, prioritizes space that is safe for pedestrians.
Good. I like I said, I'm with you. You know, we don't just want to put it willy-nilly anywhere, but I do think it's important to put it, to have it certain areas that is feasible, to do something like that. So my last question, and I ask all my guests the same question. So it's a perfect world. I give you all the power that you need in order to affect change that helps the community, serves the people. And it doesn't have to be just one thing, but if I gave you all, if I had that power to give you, and you were all knowing, you could see into the future, you could do anything you wanted to do, and you could change it, what would it be?
So how Thanos like snaps his fingers and like everything changes, and for him, he thought like overpopulation was like the issue. I don't in the world, I don't think that overpopulation is the problem. I think there's more than enough, and we live in a post-scarcity world. So there's more than enough to go around. And if I could snap my fingers, I would have there just be enough for everybody, and everyone having enough, and them being okay with that. Enough to survive, enough to be happy, enough to be comfortable, and yeah, not having to have more than that,
Great answer, Nicholas. Great answer. So, Nicholas, we're about to close out now, but please give us your contact information and the website for the Miami Transit Alliance.
Yes. So Transit Alliance Miami, we just launched a new campaign. It's called It Takes Transit. So you can go on our website and take the ITT pledge. The website is transitalliance.miami. And again, my name is Nick Duran. I'm the Advocacy Manager. And you can reach me if you'd like at nicholas@transitalliance.miami.
All right. Thank you, Nicholas. We greatly appreciate you. Thanks so much for coming and talking about an issue that affects every single one of us, no matter what you are. I mean, from babies to older adults, it affects every single one of us, and we're greatly appreciative for Nicholas Duran and the Miami Transit Alliance. I'm your host. I'm Cornell Cruz Jr., Executive Director for the Community Reinvestment Alliance of Florida, and this has been the Just Economy Podcast, and we look forward to seeing you soon.